The Nazis knew what they stood for. Do we? Hello world, and welcome to my channel, where I think out loud, talk about books, and even, on occasion, stir the pot. In today's video, I would like to share with you a deeply frightening and informative book entitled Nietzsche and the Nazis, a personal account by Stephen R.C. Hicks. Now, at first, to be totally honest with you, I actually listened to this book on accident. I have trouble falling asleep, so I usually listen to podcasts, lectures, live streams, debates, anything to help lull me into an unconscious state. And this book happened to come on in my YouTube feed. And I woke up at about the half-hour mark thinking, what am I listening to? This is absolutely amazing and terrifying at the same time, and I need more of it. So I guess before I go any further, I should extend a heartfelt thanks to the author Stephen R.C. Hicks for making this work publicly available on YouTube in the form of an audiobook. I've linked it in the description below. It's only 3 hours long, and it's probably the best 3 hours you're going to spend in terms of your academic life. This work proved to be a highly enlightening and horrifying examination of Nietzsche's philosophical impact upon the development of National Socialism. More hauntingly, however, it provides a chilling glimpse of the commonalities between our own current political movements in the West and the radicalization of German youth in the 1920s and 30s. If you have an interest in social justice, politics, or perhaps even coming down on the right side of history, this book is an indispensable read. It sheds lights on the foundations of the Nazis' beliefs, allowing us to examine our own cultural impulses in a manner that is just as rebarbative as it is essential. Let's dive in. Both Nietzsche and the Nazis devalued reason and prized passion above all else. They viewed rationality, the ability to think analytically through problems, as a means of trammeling the human spirit as opposed to freeing it. They viewed it as a means of obstructing humanity from achieving the greatest aims of which they were capable. I can't help but see an obvious commonality in the times in which we are currently living, 2021, in that we now have entered this strange age where, according to some, Twitter aficionados, 2 + 2 cannot possibly equal 4. That reason and mathematics and the scientific method, everything else that requires deductive reasoning, is somehow a contrivance of the white man and is therefore oppressive and terrible, and must be eschewed. Stephen Hicks does not explicitly make this comparison in his book Nietzsche and the Nazis, a personal account. However, he does throw into sharp relief just how easily rationality and reason may be cast aside if only one is fortunate enough to capture the highest peaks of academia. Which brings me to my next point. One element that really struck me in Hicks's book was what a critical role elementary school teachers, professors, and academics played in the Nazis' rise to power. Elementary school teachers were disproportionately likely to be members of the Nazi Party, and university professors radicalized an entire generation of German youth to embrace their socialist ideals. Even more frighteningly, it wasn't government officials who organized the first book burnings on May 15th, 1933. It was the university students. Just like in Mao's China during the Cultural Revolution, university students were, in fact, the first ones to call for censorship. The author goes on to teach us that the Nazis believed that people were divided into ethnic and racial groups, and that these groups shaped their identity. In fact, Nazi ideology had much in common with Marxism in that both sought to divide people into groups of the oppressed and the oppressors. However, the Nazis differed because they felt that Marx was far too focused on economics and not nearly enough on race. To the Nazis, dividing people into separate racial groups was of paramount importance because people of different racial groups were inherently different, i.e., racial essentialism. Which brings me to yet another moment in Hicks's book where I had to stop and just really let it sink in just how little we've learned from the horrors of the 20th century. We have racial essentialists today in the form of critical race theorists who have succeeded in radicalizing a certain percentage of our youth in the Western world into believing that society can in fact be divided into groups of oppressors and the oppressed, and that furthermore you can break this down upon racial lines, intersectional politics, if you will. You can cleanly divide people by their skin color, by their ethnicity, and they know so little about what happened in the 1920s and 30s in Germany or in China, that they think that they are bringing forth the next enlightenment. Although don't worry, they'll sneer at that word too. I enjoyed the fact that in this book, Hicks thoroughly dispelled the canard that the Nazis weren't actually socialists. Yes, they were. They believed in a strong, centralized government that could enforce its ideals from the top down. They abhorred capitalism. In fact, it was Goebbels who said that every penny is sticky with blood. Both Nietzsche and the Nazis believed that democracy was a dangerous tool for diffusing power into the hands of individuals who were mediocre and couldn't possibly advocate for the livelihood or the views of exceptional individuals. Additionally, according to Hicks, Nietzsche believed that moral codes were created by weaker groups to protect themselves from the strong and, as history would have it, are not rooted in any fixed or objective standard. He viewed the Bible as one of the most egregious examples of a narrative put forth by a corrupt class in order to help the Jews escape their presumed slavery in ancient Egypt. It gave a narrative for both slaves and masters to abide by. Stephen Hicks goes on to highlight several more important historical lessons in his book, Nietzsche and the Nazis, a personal account. And I truly recommend it to anyone who has an interest in not repeating the errors of the past. It's short, it's enlightening, it's terrifying, and it will, at the very least, help you sleep. Or perhaps it will deprive you of sleep, depending on, your personal persuasion. Tired, what do you want from me? Anyway, Stephen R.C. Hicks ends his book, Nietzsche and the Nazis, a personal account, on the following quote. And it's the same quote that I began this video on. And I'm ending it on this quote for a reason, because I think it's one that we should really think about and truly consider. The Nazis knew what they stood for. Do we? Thank you for listening. Have a good night.